In today's video, we're taking a look at the Vancouver Canucks rumors from Elliotte Friedman on the 32 Thoughts segment on Hockey Night in Canada. Are they looking for a major retool but not a rebuild? And as Elias Pettersson, their only untouchable player, leaving some pretty big names available for trade. Plus, we have some trade rumors involved in the Philadelphia Flyers, some updates on the World Junior Championships coming up, some substantial players as well. I think a few interesting names on the waiver wire, and more from the NHL and around junior hockey. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today in today's video. Like yesterday, I just want to remind you as well, there is a pretty good sale going on at the Fanatics store, which of course is one of our channel partners. I will put up a link down in the pinned comment. Some great sales. They have lots of items up to 60-70% off for the holidays. So certainly you still have a little bit of time left to get orders in and have a chance for it to be shipped and arrive on time for Christmas or any of the holidays coming up here. So certainly want to check that out if you haven't already to get your NHL merchandise for the holidays. Now into today's video, we do, like I said, have some very interesting names on waivers. It's a busy day in the waiver wire. We have a couple of players for unconditional waivers and some regular waivers as well. Now for unconditional waivers, we have New York Islanders forward Nikita Stoshnikov. Of course, Stoshnikov's leaving the NHL for the second time. Had a good go-around the first time. At least, looked like he was in development to a pretty good prospect, but never really got a ton of opportunities. Started with the Leafs. He was there for, I think it was 3 years. Spent some time with the St. Louis Blues. And eventually went back to Russia where he played for like 4 or 5 seasons. And then recently, just this year, made a return. Of course, Lou Lamoriello, Islanders GM, was working with the Leafs at the time when he was there, so a very familiar situation and relationship between the player and the manager, so made sense to give him a shot. Certainly, like I said, there was still opportunity there to get that player to really fulfill his potential. Played well in Russia, but just didn't get a lot of chances at the NHL level this year with the Isles, and when he did, it didn't go well. So they're already mutually deciding to part ways, and I assume he's likely heading back to play in the KHL. So the Stoshnikov experiment on Long Island is coming to an end here already, and the New York Islanders have a 2018 fifth-round pick, Danila Zaravlov, who was his first season in North America that he hadn't come over yet after being drafted. Obviously not thrilled with the opportunity he's been getting, and I don't know where he's heading next, but I assume more than likely heading back somewhere in Europe or another league around the world here somewhere. Now on the waiver wire as well, we have the Oilers with defenseman Jason Demers. Now this is due to him being signed. Of course, he was already signed to an American Hockey League only deal. So he's been playing for their AHL affiliate, and now they want to get him on a 2-way NHL contract. So they have the option of calling him up. So they've signed him to a 1-year contract at $750,000 at the NHL level, $325,000 for the AHL level. So I believe that'll get him a raise as well for his time in the minors should he continue to play there, and he'll be eligible for call-up, of course, assuming he clears. But because of that, he does have to go through waivers before that contract can be made official on the Oilers roster. So we'll see if anybody claims him. I would suspect he likely goes unclaimed. He hadn't played in the league in a while. Came in on a PTO with the Oilers, and I guess they've been happy with him so far as an extra depth piece to have around. So we'll see where that goes. Also on waivers today, the Red Wings have forward Austin Czarnik on waivers. Of course, he played last year in Seattle, this year in Detroit. Has appeared this year in 11 games, put up 3 points. And the Boston Bruins also have forward Craig Smith on waivers. Craig Smith has been in and out of the rumor mill for the better part of this year and parts of last year as well. Longtime Nashville Predator, signed a free agent contract with the Bruins. I believe this is his final year. He's appeared in 17 games this year, has 1 goal, 3 assists. Has certainly fallen out of favor there with the coaching staff. No huge surprise when you're not producing. And certainly is just that, to me, that's just a player who probably should have stayed in Nashville. He was really consistent there for a long time, and goes to a new team in free agency for more money than the Preds were offering, and it just never really worked out. I mean, his first year was okay. Last year, again, not great, and then this year's gotten even worse again. So there's been lots of rumors about the Bruins wanting to move him. There just hasn't been any takers because of the lack of production. The AAV on him making over $3 million might be, reduce the chances of him getting picked up. I would think that it probably won't happen just because of what he's making. But that's going to be a lot of, buried money for the Bruins and their AHL affiliate, because I assume they'll assign him down should he clear. They've also got Chris Wagner down there, Mike Riley, Anton Strawman, a bunch of guys who played mostly in the NHL before And like I said, it's a lot of buried money. I know they'd love to move some of these guys, but it's tough when they're not producing. So we'll see what happens on the waiver wire tomorrow. If either Craig Smith or Austin Czarnik is possibly picked up. I know Czarnik, of course, connected to the Bruins from before. I've seen some rumblings online, but it was only from fan base, so no real connection or source to say that it's a thing. But maybe if they can move on from Craig Smith, that they might want to pick up Czarnik and get him back. Maybe seeing him as a better bottom six option. So we'll see if there's activity tomorrow or not. Either way, not a huge deal or anything to really get too excited about. Another signing today as well. The St. Louis Blues have signed prospect Marc-Andre Gaudette, who's a 2022 fifth-round pick, 19-year-old left-shot defenseman playing in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, currently for Chicoutimi. So he gets his ELC officially on the books here with St. Louis. Now, some other news and notes from the NHL's 32 Thoughts segment on Hockey Night in Canada last night, featuring Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick, talking a bit about the junior hockey leagues around Canada, including the QMJHL and the WHL, whose both leagues appear to be getting new leadership over the next one season or so. Like by the end of next year, both leagues appear to have a new commissioner. So Quebec Major Junior Hockey League Commissioner Gilles Couture has apparently already announced that he's stepping down. They're hoping to have a replacement in place by the spring, and that they can spend a full season under his guidance and tutelage to be able to take over the role for the season after. A couple of rumored names to possibly lead that league next to include some former NHL players and prominent guys that you've seen that had some pretty decent NHL careers, have been involved with other aspects of hockey after they retired as well, including former goalie Jocelyn Thibault, another former goalie Marc Denis, and Stefan Quintel, former defenseman, of course, worked in the NHL executive office here as well. And Western Hockey League leader Ron Roberts has also announced he's also stepping down after next season as well, and they'll be going through a similar process over there to find a replacement, likely sometime early next year, so they can also have some time to be mentored before they officially take on the job on a full-time basis. So we should have pretty well new leadership across Canadian junior hockey here as well. Now, I do know of reports put out by the Globe and Mail today involving the 2018 Team Canada team investigation, and that obviously some pretty heinous accusations that came forward that we learned about over the summer. There was a 94-page report from the police that was able to be reviewed by the Globe and Mail, and they have a lot of details out. I do want to talk about that, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some time this evening and read through it. I want to get all the details as accurate as possible. I don't want to just kind of run through it here and only give it a 30-second or a minute segment here in this video. So I'm probably going to do a dedicated video on that tomorrow. To summarize, the headline of this report says that police believe that they have enough to say that they believe there was 5 players from the 2018 World Junior team involved. So like I said, we'll talk about that more likely tomorrow when I analyze the report, go through the details, and we'll kind of comb through and highlight the important sections and details of what we now know about this case, because it's such a big deal and important thing. I want to give it the time it deserves to be discussed here on the channel. Now, before we go further in the video, I just want to give a quick update on a story we discussed yesterday, and that was unfortunate news, sad news of the London, Ontario, London Knights player who tragically died suddenly this weekend. And that was 18-year-old Abakar Kazbeskov. When the news first broke, all we knew was that he died suddenly, and of course the team had canceled a game. They had a Christmas party planned coming up as well. That was canceled, and just everybody kind of went home for their holiday break here. It was really sad, unfortunate news. We knew he had moved to Canada, been playing lower level hockey in Canada for a few years. I believe he's been here for about 3 years of his first year with the London Knights. The one thing I want to address is some of the comments on yesterday's video regarding his death, suggesting that without any shred of evidence or anything, commenting how that they felt it was almost a given that the COVID vaccine is likely what killed this young man, which I found infuriating to me. I know there's some people out there that think that this is the case, that people are dying because of the vaccine, which there was absolutely no proof of, by the way, in case, I just don't want people spreading conspiracies and BS on this channel through the comments. I just really don't, it infuriates me, period. Secondly, we have an update on the story as well to kind of deny any of that anyways, not that we needed to. The fact that you're using a young man's death to promote a conspiracy theory, to me, disgusts me. And if you are offended by that and you want to not subscribe or watch my videos, I honestly don't care. Please move along with your conspiracies. I don't want to see them. But honestly, there was also news reported by CTV and other local news outlets in London that he died from falling from a building. So the belief is that it was a suicide death. I don't know. I'm sure that'll likely get confirmed or whatnot. Not to be really, it's none of our business anyways. But that was in local news that I've been able to source myself. So maybe when you see somebody pass away, you should actually do a little bit of research and maybe wait for something to be confirmed over what happened instead of spreading, that type of news around and using a young man's or anybody's death for that matter to spread false information. So that's not something I want to see in this channel. And if you leave comments like that, they will be deleted. And if you don't want to watch because I said this, then so be it. But please don't leave those comments on this channel. I don't want to see that at all. Now, another piece of business that was discussed in the 32 Thoughts segment that we had also touched on in the last day or two from other reports include the potential changing of the NHL schedule sometime here in the near future. Of course, ESPN had a report out talking about how the NHL is considering a 82 to 84 game schedule and potentially adding 2 extra games during the regular season. Now, they talked about it further on 32 Thoughts segment, and their interpretation is exactly verifying that they've been able to say that the ESPN report appears to be accurate from their perspective, that they've learned a lot of the same things, and that one of the kind of spin-off effects you could say is if they ever do that, is that they would likely have fewer preseason games, possibly even shorter training camps. That would likely have to be a concession that the NHL would have to make to the players to get them to be on board with this. At this point, the NHL has not approached the NHLPA to make this official for open for discussion or anything they really want to do, but it sounds like it's something that's been discussed at the Board of Governor meetings, and at least there is some appetite for it, like I said, to get more rivalry games and just to kind of level things out. I'll show you here a graphic from the Sportsnet segment to show you how the breakdown of games would work so they could get more games within their division for their rivals, still play the other teams in their conference a good amount, and then of course make an appearance in every other building across the league in another conference and have those teams go to them once, so they'll have 2 games a season in the opposite conference. So it's still a pretty decent way of doing things. It just adds a little bit more time for divisional rival games, which is certainly good for ratings, good for business and everything like that. But of course, like I said, if the NHL wants to push that on the players, they're going to have to give some concessions. We know players have already voiced their opinions before, citing shorter training camps and fewer preseason games would likely be right at the top of their list to have that really taken serious consideration. Canada and the U.S. have both named captains for their World Junior teams for the upcoming World Junior Championships. So it'll get underway here in my home province of New Brunswick on December 26th on Boxing Day. Like usual, Canada has named Kraken prospect and number 4 overall pick from this year's draft, Shea Wright. Their captain, Luke Hughes, is now captain for the American team from the U.S. So certainly a couple of prominent prospects getting the C's for their countries. Of course, with Shea Wright, I know we heard some rumblings about character issues is why he dropped in the draft when he was supposed to go first, dropped to 4th. And the big thing is that I think the main reason teams thought that or said that about him was the fact that he's not one of the players who made arrangements to go play in Europe when the OHL was shut down due to the pandemic. I don't know why or why not that didn't happen, but either way, I don't think that's a real big thing. I mean, he's now been named captain between all the different age levels. I think this is his 4th or 5th time being a Team Canada captain. So clearly, a lot of people within his coaching, people that have handled him or been on his teams with him over the years, certainly value him as having high character. So we'll see if that comes to be a regret of NHL teams that pass on him in the draft or not. I know he certainly seems highly motivated to prove a lot of people wrong that didn't have actually didn't pick him 1, 2, or 3. So we'll see where that goes in the future. But interesting to see them name their captains here for the tournament. Now, on to the trade section of the video. One name as well brought up in the 32 Thoughts segment, which we've discussed here recently as well, is Flyers forward James Van Riemsdyk. It's now been made known through these reports that their sources say the Flyers have not only are open to it, but have made him available. Sounds like he's being actively shopped on the trade market. Merrick went on to say that obviously a couple of things to keep in mind here with JVR. Not only is he having another decent season production-wise, but certainly his contract might be a little bit easier to move than one might think. Yes, the cap hit is $7 million, but of course the Flyers can retain some money on that to knock it down. But of course, even though it's $7 million cap hit, it's only $5 million actual cash, and $1 million of that was already been paid out in signing bonus. So it's only $4 million total salary payments throughout the season. Of course, some of that's going to end up being paid already by the time we get to the deadline. It really wouldn't be a lot of actual cash out of the next team's pocket to rent him out and his services for the remainder of the season. So it might be, an attractive option for teams looking either for power play help, net front help, or just a little extra goal scoring, even if they want to put him lower in their lineup. He doesn't necessarily have to be a first line player. I mean, at this rate of his career, JVR could easily be a third line player that might get some power play time or even PP2 time, get some net front stuff. He can still be useful, I think. And if the Flyers retain 50%, knock that down to $3.5 million, but you're only paying out, say, $1.5 to $2 million in cash, that's really not that bad, really, overall. Wouldn't be shocked if he was traded, either at the deadline or sometime before. We'll have to see, but could be an attractive piece for teams heading into the playoffs. But the biggest news of the night, of course, came from Elliotte Friedman to lead off the 32 Thoughts segment, talking about Vancouver, which has been one of the hottest topics in the rumor mill here for the last number of weeks, as the team has not really had a great start to the season. We know changes are likely coming, but we've been saying that, it seems like forever. Ever since Alvin and Rutherford took over this team, there's been rumors about all these changes and what players might go, and they want to change the mix. We want to do this, we want to do that. And they really haven't done a lot of anything. There's been very little movement amongst that Canucks roster outside of, suddenly surprising everybody in signing JT Miller to a $56 million 8-year deal. Certainly not something that we expected at all. I mean, Friedman made it clear on the segment as well that when it comes to Bo Horvat, that, this rate, the Canucks don't want to pay Horvat more than Miller, but certainly the way Horvat's playing this year, he absolutely deserves that on the open market, and will get that easily, if not a fair bit more. So that's why they come to the conclusion that unless the Canucks significantly come up in price, which is not expected, at least at this point, that the likelihood of Horvat being traded is extremely high. So certainly it makes sense on that front. But for them to go on and say that Elias Pettersson is really the only untouchable, according to what the Canucks told Friedman, that's a pretty interesting tidbit of information. Now, he also goes on to say as well that they don't want a rebuild. This team, in my opinion, desperately needs it. They could keep a couple young players to build around, but certainly, we know that the ownership there has not had any appetite for a rebuild for a really long time, which is certainly, to me, a big part of the reason why this team's been spinning its tires and not getting really ahead for a long time as well. They've been, either out of the playoffs, mediocre at best, really for a long, long time. Like, you really ever since the end of the time when we've seen like the Sedins and those guys kind of making some progress and having some playoff runs, it's been a long time since this team has truly been a contender. And a lot of that, to me, like I said, is because of their lack of appetite to go and embrace a rebuild and give this team a solid run of gathering prospects and picks to build the right way, like we've seen other teams do extremely successfully. Tear it down, let it, But really, if you think about it, Pettersson being the only untouchable. Now, he went on to say as well that Quinn Hughes is not an untouchable, which many found very interesting, but at the same time, he wanted to clarify that they're not actively looking to trade Quinn Hughes, but it would take a mammoth offer to get it done, which I would expect anyways, right? Certainly, Quinn Hughes is a young, exciting, very mobile, offensively gifted defenseman, and yes, if any team was going to talk to Vancouver about a trade, I suspect the price tag would be very high. Now, of course, doesn't mean that they said that they want to actively move him, but it just goes to show if a team calls up and says, so, Quinn Hughes, what do you think? They'd be like, make an offer, right? Doesn't mean that he's untouchable, which is surprising, to say the least. The one team that jumps out in everybody's mind, which has been talking about on social media, see a lot of people talking about here, is the Devils, considering they've got his two brothers, and Jack, and of course Luke is not there yet, but he's drafted by the Devils and will be there likely as early as end of this year or next season. So certainly to have Quinn on the roster, I'm sure the Devils would be interested in that. And to be honest, they do have a pretty deep, group of young players and prospects and picks and things. If they're one of the teams that would actually have the ability to make a substantial offer, I'm not saying they're going to. There's no rumors saying that they are or they will, but it's interesting that they could certainly do what I think would be better positioned than a lot of teams at least. And it's, certainly something that many found very, very interesting. Of course, you get Thatcher Demko at one point kind of viewed upon not having a great year this year, but certainly considered a high-end goaltender. We've seen what he can do. JT Miller, not an untouchable either, but just signed a mammoth long-term contract, not living up to it already. I don't see him going anywheres. Not to say that there weren't teams interested. There was a lot of rumors that teams, including the New York Rangers, made a pretty substantial offer in the offseason, but the Canucks never accepted it and they never moved forward, and they ended up signing him instead. And I do think there has to be buyer's remorse there, considering what they've gotten out of Miller so far this year. I don't care what the point totals are that he's putting up. There's been too many times of him being lazy on the back check, lazy defensively, just the effort. You really got to question things. It looks like, unfortunately, like a classic case of somebody getting paid and then losing their desire to care as much. That's my take on it. Unfortunately, you see a lot of players do that. It doesn't always happen, but it's just been, that's why there's been so many free agent contracts. Not all players have that drive, desire, and heart to want to not only win, but once they get their money and they know that they're set, some of them do lose that drive. It's just the nature of how people are. I'm not saying that that's a case with Miller, but just from an outsider looking in and watching games when I'm able to, like, it's just, you can't help but wonder is that what's going on? Because really, this is not the same JT Miller we saw last year in a contract year. And I would suggest, even though I love Bo Horvat as a player and think he'd be great on a lot of teams, that they be careful in offering him $9 or $10 million in a long-term deal. Is he going to be able to keep up this production, year after year for an extended time to earn that money too? Like, it's such a risky business with free agents that you just never know. But lots of names on that team certainly seem extremely interesting, and I do wonder what we're going to see out of Vancouver. Like, for right now and for the longest time, it's been a lot of talk and not much action. So is Jim Rutherford going to pull the trigger on a Brock Boeser deal? He's a name we've heard lots about over the last number of weeks, as well as Boeser and the Canucks are trying to find a way to move him along. They've given his agent permission to speak with other teams to try to find a deal as well. So we know Boeser's likely going to get moved. You have to think there's going to be interest in Demko, regardless of how he's doing this year, just given the fact of what they've seen in the past. Even though Quinn Hughes is not a likely player to be dealt, the fact that he's now known as not to be untouchable, it makes you wonder if a team will throw a crazy offer at Vancouver just to see how they'd react, and will they pull the trigger? Makes you wonder. Horvat, we know, likely could go. So the factor that Friedman is saying is that they don't want to rebuild, that they want to change their mix and, change things up and kind of retool on the fly. That's what they've been doing for some time and are trying to do, but they really haven't done much of anything. So when is Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin going to pull the trigger here and kind of see what happens? It should be a very interesting time in between now and the deadline to see how the Canucks do this. Certainly they have some pieces there that could get them some good returns, but I know there's been a lot of talk that because of the Brock Boeser situation and his contract and his production being down and the fact that they've given the agent permission, that it's likely going to impact the value that they get on a trade, and they might have to sell low on Brock Boeser. But at the same time, the argument, I guess, is that even though they might not get the return they would have hoped for at one point when these players were playing better and producing more, that the salary cap flexibility that will come with the return will be worth it as best as it can, because it appears as though there was original rumor on Boeser was that they wanted a future-based package, but now the suggestion is that they don't. They really would like to get a young centerman or a young defenseman in return. And same thing goes for Bo Horvat. Like when they trade Boeser and Horvat, is they don't necessarily want all futures. They'd probably be open to some prospects being included, but they would like a couple of younger NHL caliber players to be included in these deals so that they can kind of, go and change their mix, as Friedman wanted to say, right? So be interested to see how successful they will be with these deals. How much of a change will we see? Could a team step up and make an offer crazy enough for them to consider a Quinn Hughes trade? It's unlikely, but it's certainly interesting to think about, and it makes you wonder what's going to happen in Vancouver. So let me know your thoughts on all of that today down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.